All right, thank you so much. As you just heard, my name is Jason McDowall. Some of you might have heard this voice. I run a podcast called The AR Show, where for the last 6 years or so, I've had the pleasure of interviewing a lot of the folks that you see around the conference today, as well as many of the folks here up on the panel. And we're going to talk about AR, everything from the glasses I'm wearing on my head, sort of smart glasses. This is a pair from Vuzix, to Apple Vision Pro, and to the extent that that represents AR. We'll talk about that, what they've done. But let me turn it over to my fellow panelists here, starting with Jeri. We'll introduce ourselves, and we'll get into this.
I'm Jeri Ellsworth. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Tilt5. We do AR glasses. I've had the fortunate joy of working in this industry for about 13 years at Valve Software, a previous startup I did, and my current startup.
Karl?
Okay, I'm Karl Guttag. I do a blog, KG on Tech, where I talk about all kinds of different AR and mixed reality optics and displays, mostly hardware. Way back when, I was a TI fellow at Texas Instruments. For about 20 years, I was at TI. I'm an electrical engineer by trade. People get surprised by that. They think of me as an optics person, but I really kind of got into optics by accident via working on silicon. I'd worked on LCOS, and I've also done some AR headsets for automotive and various things. But I kind of drifted off into AR in about '98. And so after I got out of working on hardware, I started writing my blog in 2011. So it's been around for about 13 years now.
Ed?
My name is Ed Tang. I'm the CEO and founder of Avegant. At Avegant, we work on light engines. And light engines are the very tiny projectors that go into AR glasses. We're making the smallest LCOS-powered light engines today to enable really small-looking glasses. And making a good display at the right size and performance is very, very challenging today to try to enable these products. And we have some really cool stuff coming out pretty soon.
Addie?
I'm Addie Robertson. I'm a writer and editor at The Verge, where I've worked since 2011, nearly all of that time covering virtual and augmented reality, among other tech.
Great. So we're going to start with the elephant-sized Apple in the room and start with the Apple Vision Pro. And Apple's billing it as a spatial computing device. I look at it more as a VR device with some pretty amazing UI and video pass-through. But it started with a bang, followed by a little bit of a whimper? I don't know. So how is the AVP actually meaningful? Has it helped? Has it hurt the market? Addie?
So I think the thing the AVP did was that it demonstrated at a software level a thing that a lot of people who are casually interested in AR and VR like, which is the idea that it could just be a big screen that substitutes for a giant monitor or a laptop or a TV. And I think it did it in a way that kind of only Apple could have, which is to show it could fit into this existing ecosystem. And I think it also, unlike a lot of products, hasn't had a really big embarrassing moment. There's obviously the news that Apple's written down the number of units it plans to sell, but it hasn't produced glass holes or anything equivalent to that.
I think it's great. I think in general, like the AR and AR market especially, but the XR market is still early. And I think anybody entering the market, shipping a product, is going to rise tides. And someone as large as Apple just indicates that this is a real opportunity. This is a real market. I mean, it's a first-generation product. Obviously, it's not perfect. There's a lot of issues. But it's a really big deal and a big signal for the market. And I really like how they've emphasized not the VR part of it, but they've actually emphasized the AR part of it. Like so many applications in that is like pass-through AR, right? You're seeing the world. You're overlaying things in the world. And I think it's a great, call it kind of a stepping stone toward what ultimately AR should become in the future.
I really like that now all the cards are on the table from all the big players. As a player in the headset space, there's always like the boogeyman around the corner, like, oh, Apple's going to come out with something that is going to eat your lunch or going to be so great and wonderful doing everything. Now we see what it does good and what it doesn't do good, and that's helpful for our company in particular.
Yeah. Karl, so why does Apple build that device as opposed to something like this?
Well, because they couldn't build something like that. It's a very hard problem to get to a mass audience with these things. I try to make a very important point that there's a difference between optical AR and pass-through AR. But pass-through AR, you've really made a decision that the image quality and the virtual environment is the most important thing to you. In optical AR, the most important thing is seeing the real world. And I think people get this very badly confabulated that they're very different problems and aiming at different things. Like I've used Big Screen Beyond, which doesn't have pass-through, and it's a pain in the neck not to find your mouse. But if you're trying to find your mouse or a can of Coke or something, then pass-through AR is acceptable. But you're not going to go out on a factory floor with that. It's kind of searching for a market. And as I said before, everyone complains about the price. And one of my biggest points is that I bought a Mac 128K. It was adjusted for inflation at $7,000. The problem with the Apple Vision Pro is not the price. The problem is utility. The reason why it stalled in sales is because of that.
And let's take it from a technical perspective, and we'll come back to maybe an application and utility perspective. But what are some of the hard trade-offs that an Apple or anybody has to make when designing these sorts of devices?
I mean, one of the big factors is it's just the human head, right? Like our heads are not changing, our heads are not going to evolve anytime soon. And so you kind of have a limitation on what you can get onto your head and what visually is comfortable. And then it starts kind of diving into what are the applications that you're going to use and how you design a product for that. Just like Karl said, you're not going to wear an Apple Vision Pro. It's a great product, but you're not going to wear it down the street. You're not going to wear it all the time every day. But if you want to really replace something like a pair of glasses, you need to be a really small, light form factor, right? You're talking like 50 grams, very light, very small, fashionable, and that fundamentally, at least with the technology that exists today, puts some limits to what you can put into a device like that. The field of view, the brightness, the power, the thermal dissipation, and the power capacity, and what performance you can put into it, really starts putting in the limitations on what you can do inside a pair of glasses that comfortably fits your head, that you can wear all day. The good news is the technologies that are out there have starting to reach what I would call the minimum viable product. Like we're seeing a lot of really exciting key components now in light engines and waveguides and processors that really can enable good product experiences very soon.
And the thing that I casually observe about these video pass-through AR/VR devices is that they seem to be replacing at some level devices like the Magic Leap or Microsoft, in the HoloLens device. But they don't seem to be replacing anybody who wants to be on a shop floor, for example, moving around. Jeri, love your take on kind of where does this sort of device, like the Apple Vision Pro with the video pass-through, great VR device, video pass-through, to create these AR experiences, where does that fit long term?
I feel in some ways, if we're going for true AR, it's a dead-end path for us. Like you're just not going to have the same dynamic range of your eyes, the same field of view. There's always going to be a small amount of latency. However, on the flip side, I think there is utility in these types of devices, and that's important. And every emerging technology or space goes through this phase of clunky form factors, cell phones, personal computers, things like that. Computers that were good for doing spreadsheets weren't great for playing video games in the early days, right? And over time, they start to consolidate down until you have a great phone in your pocket, but it doesn't happen overnight.
But you think this design thread is a dead-end design as it relates to AR?
True AR like glasses that you're looking at. I just don't think it's possible to be able to do that kind of processing and have displays, in a form factor like that.
Yeah. Let's dip in a bit into this challenge around the displays and the optics, which are kind of really fundamental, some of the fundamental problems that we're dealing with here. So we're looking at this point in time, what's working? What sorts of technologies on the display side, on the optics side, are actually working, have potential? Which ones look like, fantasies that will never come to be? Ed, why don't you start, and then Karl jump in.
Yeah, I think Karl and I probably will have very similar perspectives on this. I mean, I think the thing is there has to be some constraints and some assumptions that go into these products. If I want to make a pair of glasses that look like a pair of glasses, they need to be that size, that shape, that weight, that transparency. And this is why you pretty much have to assume that everybody's going toward waveguide technologies. So waveguides, if you guys don't know, are a very thin optical element. It looks like a lens. It's totally transparent, and we project an image into one side and it reflects it back into your eye through this waveguide. Now, the pros of waveguides is that they're very thin, they're very generally pretty light, they're very transparent, they look very glasses-like. But the downside of these waveguides is the performance isn't great. Like the image quality isn't great, and at least not compared to the displays that we're normally used to seeing, like a TV or a phone or whatever, or even a VR device. And the other downside is they're not that efficient either. And so like having these like lower efficiency, mediocre image quality trade-offs that you're making to get to that form factor seems like to be the direction that everybody's going right now to achieve the glasses. The good news is they're kind of good enough, right? Like the image quality is getting there, and the other warts of the system is kind of getting there, but there's still limitations on that. Like because of the power efficiency that these things have, it kind of limits things like field of view. Like we can get to a large field of view waveguide, 50 degrees, 70 degrees, and you see that in products like Magic Leap, but that specification is not going to get into a glasses-like form factor anytime soon. So the stuff that we're seeing today is generally in the 20, 30, maybe up to 50-degree field of view in glasses-like form factors, and that's going to be where the market is going to be in the next couple of years. On the display side, because you're using a waveguide and they're inefficient, there's only certain kinds of displays that are even possible to power these things. You're not going to use an OLED panel. It's not bright enough, right? So you're kind of limited to micro LEDs, LCOS, DLP, and laser beam scanning. Well, I think we all kind of know laser beam scanning kind of became a disaster. DLP, unfortunately, great image quality, but kind of big and expensive, so that's kind of a problem. Micro LEDs just aren't ready. Like so many manufacturing quality and cost issues in micro LEDs, and that's why the market for the foreseeable future is going to be focused on LCOS. They all have pros and cons, but I think in the next 5 years, maybe longer, LCOS is going to be the dominant display technology for these type of products. Karl?
Yeah, I think, well, to me, the biggest problem we see at the development community, I see, is people confabulating what you can do with widescreen. I think a lot of the AR or optical stuff get really confabulated with what was going on in VR, because VR, it was really cheap and easy to make a wide field of view. Stick a cell phone with some cheap optics in front of your face, you get wide field of view. And people went crazy about that. And I made this point years ago on my blog. The problem, Thad Starner makes this point. He's one of our legends in this thing, and I took that to heart many years ago at one of these conferences. And the problem is that as soon as you say beyond about 30-degree field of view, the way I look at it today with the most advanced technology, even projecting forward of it, you go beyond 30-degree field of view, you're in a helmet, something looking like Magic Leap. And the Magic Leap ended up nowhere still. They ended up with like 25, 30% see-through, so it's not really that good see-through. And yet it's not got the image quality that you would get of an OLED display shot right in your eyes. You could get a better image on an X-reel or something like that. And so we get these, people are getting confabulating too many different specs. So they want a wide field of view. The problem is as soon as you say 50 degrees, and then you say, yeah, and I need like spatial recognition. I want to do SLAM, and I want to do this, and I want to do that. You've now spiraled into a headset, to a helmet. I mean, you know, Meta was talking the other day on the other panels and said, you know, they're looking at like 50 grams. You know, my glasses are 23 grams. You're out of that. As soon as you say 50-degree field of view, you're over 100 grams and heading to the moon as you add more and more cameras and all this other stuff. So I think that's one of our bigger problems, whereas AR, really optical AR, the experiment we're going to see played out, because I think a lot of people are working on it, is this thing, the AI audio glasses. You know, we're going to see if that works, because a lot of people are getting ready to do glasses that have a little bit of stuff, like a 20 to 30 degree field of view, tied into AI/audio and stuff.
So there's lots of hard trade-offs. We can either have a great visual experience, or we can have a great real-world experience. It's very, very difficult to get both, certainly a device that you can move through the real world with. One trade-off that some companies are making is that they choose to make it lighter by tethering it, by putting a cable that runs power and data to some other device, whether that device is a smartphone already in your pocket or some other device. How viable is that? Like, what are the trade-offs of actually tethering? Jeri, I'd love for you to.
Oh, I mean, that's a great question for me, because our product is wired to other devices like phones and PCs. And we made that specific trade-off because we wanted the glasses to be very low cost. You know, you had an existing device. In our case, I think Nreal is an example of you can utilize your existing devices that you carry around with you. The second thing is you just get a lot of weight and heat off of the device, and that's important. And so by tethering, you can have an in-between kind of experience where it's a little closer to the ultimate. What we want is 25-gram headsets, but you get some immersion, you get some more compute. You get the batteries. I mean, the batteries are killer. If you want to always-on kind of experience, the batteries would just, you'd be dragging a car battery around with you for most of these headsets.
Yeah. Eddie, can tethering remain part of the long-term solution? We talk about tethering as a way to offload and make these things really light, as Jeri has done with her device, but even the Apple Vision Pro is still a tethered device and not very light, ultimately.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of the question about tethering is whether wireless tethering has a future. Because I think once something is wireless, then it opens up a lot more toward, okay, I just want to like offload some of the heavier computing power to a phone or to a device that stays in my bag. I think that's more viable. I think wires are just so inconvenient. And they also mean that you have to build in a bunch of different affordances for, say, designing things like carrying something if you don't have pockets. Like Magic Leap had to make this whole little sling in case you couldn't clip it to your pants. I think that wires are really hard.
Wireless is potential, though. So smartphone as a companion device is okay?
I think potentially, especially because smart watches have become a thing that at least has a use case but still tends to be tethered.
Yeah, I think it still comes down to power, though. To do wireless up to a headset, that consumes a lot of power, and you have to deal with the latency of the transmission across. So you have to have a certain level of processing in the headset, which pushes you into an inconvenient place.
Yeah, I'll just say out of all the AR products that we've seen, we haven't seen a single product that's like purely untethered, right? It's like everything is going to rely on your phone that's next to you. You have to have that compute there. And people are primarily looking at like split compute type things, right? You do a little bit of processing up here and then you do more processing down there. There's no way to get it all up in your glasses. And there's also no way to do it 100% wireless because the wireless power is actually quite high. So there's always going to be some sort of like split mixed compute solution.
I think from a pure practical level, I'm very big that the phone is quote free. You get a very powerful processor in here that you can't match in headsets because the volumes they have in phones mean they can put much more compute per dollar in your pocket. I'm generally, for most applications, I'm against tethering though. Particularly if you're looking at anything like in the AR world where you're going to be in an industrial or running around world, that thing's a snag hazard. And one of my sayings is, there is no breakaway that will break away easy enough that it won't be a snag hazard, that won't break away to be so often that it's annoying. And so I believe in wireless tethering. Even if I'd rather have a headset with a bustle on the back and put as much up there. And I don't mind having the compute down here if I have to do that for the wireless or the battery. Maybe put the battery back there. But I'm not just thinking glasses, particularly in the industrial environment, which I think there's the real market today for AR glasses.
And how should we distinguish between the different buckets of devices that are emerging?
Sorry, question for me. I mean, I think that ultimately the application and the product will drive what the product specs are going to be, right? If I'm designing a pair of glasses for like a warehouse worker and you're going to go pick things off of a shelf, like that's probably a very different pair of glasses than you're trying to fix a jet engine standing next to an airplane, or you're a gaming device at home, or you want to be your always-on like consumer AR AI assistant. I think these are all very different products. Like some of the technologies in there will have overlap, but the product spec overall will be extremely different. Some will have tethers, some won't have tethers, and some will have big batteries and some won't. And I think there isn't necessarily a right answer, but I think that there's so many trade-offs right now to get to these type of products that they basically essentially become optimized per use case, per application.
I think we're starting to see a shift in the expectations of the consumers that now we're going to get more application-specific devices. I just think back to the earliest days of like this new revival of VR, XR stuff. Everyone was just really hoping there would be a silver bullet out there and there'd be one device to rule them all. And it's just not practical. And there's a lot of money to be made, in all these little vertical markets for a very long time.
Karl, you look like you're about to.
Oh, well, I'm just saying, like I say, it depends upon the market you're after. We're going to see like whether color is important or not. My general feeling is in the industrial market, the business market, a lot of times you could get away with green only, you get away with lesser color, but because you're doing for a market. Once again, this is AR, pass-through AR stuff. When you're talking consumer, now you need color. Consumers want color. They'll think it's old-fashioned or broken if it's not. Like I say, I'm fairly anti-tether simply because I'm worried about that snag hazard. I know in the industrial environment, I can't imagine anybody, any lawyer or safety officer in a company letting somebody run around the factory with a cable tangling down. And I personally drug a Magic Leap to its death because I forgot I had the thing in my pocket. And I've already seen at least one report of somebody doing that to an Apple Vision Pro. You forget you have the thing in your pocket, you turn around, and you sling your $3,000 thing onto the floor. And that's just dangerous on there. But imagine if there's a piece of industrial equipment or something, and heaven forbid you ever walk outside with the thing.
Let's talk about outside for a second. Does the device have to be useful outside? What can we do without? Can we do without color? Can we do without being able to go outside?
I think in some ways there are actually benefits to not going outside, because one of the things that's always made AR hard is that people outside tend to think it's creepy and invasive. They think they're constantly being surveilled or that you're not paying attention to them. And at least putting it back into the home, I think that's one of the reasons the Vision Pro hasn't had a big embarrassing moments. It's very clear that Apple doesn't really want you to use it out there.
People tried to do the embarrassing moment. If we think back to all the Cybertruck driving Vision Pro stunts.
That's true.
But I think that it's clear that that's not an Apple-sanctioned activity. I think that's the really useful distinction.
I think some of it requires a bit of a cultural shift, right? People are very concerned today about like, oh, your glasses have a camera, you're going to be spying on me. It's hard to imagine even just like 15 or 20 years ago when cameras first appeared on not smartphones, but even regular phones. People were trying to pass bills, legislator, to try to ban phones from bathrooms. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't know if people have trouble going to the bathroom without a phone these days. But I think it's part of a cultural shift. I think once these devices start providing a lot of intrinsic value to you, that people just become more accepting. Like, we can't imagine not having a camera on us these days and not having, really high quality multiple cameras in our phones. It's like one of the most valuable things now for people.
Yeah, I think if we're talking AR, like see-through optical, there'll definitely be a segment where it's just used in a factory floor or used on maybe in an Amazon warehouse to pick stuff and whatnot. But I have a hard time believing as it goes to any broader markets. There's so many of the applications that require outdoor use. If you're talking these AR, like the guys who are talking about doing the AI glasses, I can't imagine that not being outside. I mean, if you're going to go wear them on a vacation and you want to translate some stuff, I can't imagine that being not being used outdoors.
Yeah, I mean, we're like the customers we work. We're all consumer focused, and everybody's working on these like wearable AI, all-day wearable AI glasses assistants, right? Which means that you have to wear them outdoors. If you're a glasses wearer today, like half of the audience here are, if these are going to replace your glasses, well, you're going to go outside with these things. And it has particular challenges in the display side. Like when you go outside, like 1,000 nits isn't enough, right? You need 3, 4, 5, some people even say 10,000 nits, right? You need many thousands of nits to get there, and that becomes a big strain on the display system and the power side of things. The good news is that we're seeing efficiencies of waveguides and displays at 20 to 30 degrees that you actually can achieve 4,000 nits, 5,000 nits, 6,000 nits on these displays now in the current size and batteries that exist in these products. And that's not even adding the consideration that we're seeing of like photochromic is like arguably is becoming more acceptable. We're seeing a lot of work in the electrochromic now space too, which considerably reduces the amount of light that you need.
Yeah, that's good. One point I always like to make is the most important feature. If these are going to be all-day wearable, you're going to wear them a lot. Everyone picks up on weight, but one of the things I like to point out is that the most important thing is when the thing is off. You're going to have it off 98% of the time, and if what it looks like off. You can't have like little wavy lines. We have the problems with some of the diffraction gratings that are grabbing light. I've seen technology where they're talking about transparent ones, and I'm against those because I think you're just going to get a diffraction effect and you're going to blur. So one of the first things I like to do is turn the dang thing off, whatever it is I'm looking at, if it's optical, and I want to see what the world looks like when I'm reading and when I'm looking at stuff around the world. And if it messes that up, you're dead before you start.
Which is one of the sort of downsides of pass-through, that it just makes it dead in the water in anything where if it fails, you're going to crash your car or fall in the street.
My Cybertruck.
Yeah, it is nice when the device fails, you don't die. The two shouldn't go together.
Usually.
Usually.
But arguably the same thing Karl's talking about too. There's like almost anything you put in front of your eyes to do a world combiner is going to influence the transmitted light through. You know, it's pretty hazardous having on headlights coming towards you and having rainbows shoot across your eyes. So, and that's the reality of where we are right now. But there's some exciting stuff. Metamaterials look promising, you know, to maybe minimize some of these effects. And we'll have to see where that develops over time, though.
Can you give a quick overview of metamaterials? What's unique about it? What's special?
Well, metamaterials are basically a bunch of little antennas that are patterned onto the glass, and they resonate at a particular wavelength of light. And so, you know, transmitted light is very broad spectrum, and if it's a very narrow wavelength of light that it reacts to, which is coming from your display, potentially it could minimize some of those effects. Downside that we're seeing is they're so narrow, the wavelength they respond to, you know, illuminating them, there's even more inefficient than diffractive. So, like, work has to be done on, you know, how do we actually light these things up and get efficiency out of them.
I also wouldn't underestimate like the diffractive world, which is likely going to be the bigger solution for the market today, diffractive waveguides. There's a lot of great incremental improvements we're seeing in the diffractive waveguides. You know, not just like manufacturability and efficiency, but also things like reducing artifacts. Going from multi-layer down to single layer, and then changing the angle of these gratings to reduce coupling from the most problematic sources. So, you know, we're seeing a lot of improvements in kind of these like other artifact issues with like waveguide glow and rainbow artifacts and coupling unwanted light. And I expect to see continued improvements in that space as well.
Do we need to do a display at all? Right? We have Meta selling hundreds of thousands of units that have cameras, they have sensors, they have speakers. They got tie into their Meta AI. Why do we need the display? Can we do without it? What is really that MVP?
I've been looking for an AI use case, even on my phone, that makes sense, that would, I mean, it's pretty cool stuff, but I think that, I want to see that first before I start sticking it onto glasses. I mean, it's a hard sell to the broad audience out there, and tech nerds like me would love it, but.
Yeah, I think the glasses that are just purely capture devices are great, but as soon as you're trying to use it as a computing device, audio interfaces are really hard. Even with AI companies, like the Humane Pin, just nobody thinks that did what it's supposed to, and that was the entire problem that they were focused on. So I feel like sometimes I just hear it like it's a thing people are going to get for free. Of course, AI is going to give us these great audio interfaces. I'm just not seeing it yet.
I mean, people throw around these numbers, like, you know, 68% of statistics are just made up on the spot. But like people talk about the human visual system as in like, you know, 80% of your information is brought in visually. And I think that there's so much information that we interpret through vision, whether it's a graph or color or text or data, that is like, that's the fastest and most efficient way that we can absorb information. And getting things auditorily is just like quite limiting, right?
Yeah, I think they can get to a certain level, but it will be handy to have, like, even if you're doing translation or whatever it is, that flies by you. Audio is here and gone, and rolling it back is really difficult. Whereas you can roll through text, or if you had a sign or some text, it's also reinforcing to see it visually as well as hear it. So yeah, I think there's an advantage to it, and you know, you can get to a level, but the question is, will they get all the way there without that?
The other thing I'll add is like, you know, people are talking about finding the right AI applications and what is a killer app. We're still at the very infancy of these AI assistants. And I would argue that the phone isn't really a great platform for like a world-facing AI system, right? The magic of these like wearable devices, and even Humane, right? It's like this notion of when you have an AI assistant that sees what you see, that can provide so much more value to you than an AI in a computer or in a phone, right? Because it sees my world, it has like contextual information. It can provide personalized contextual information about what I'm seeing and what I've done. It could be simple things as in, where did I leave my keys? And your glasses will know. Or I ran into somebody 6 months later and said, oh, what was that guy's name? It's kind of creepy, but it might say, oh, this is Jason. You were on a panel with him 6 months ago in Long Beach. I mean, it's almost like giving yourself kind of superhuman powers, right? Of instant knowledge, instant memory, instant awareness. But that can only happen when you have see what I see type AI assistants.
It's also, I think, it's a kind of annotation, and it's very, very hard to annotate things with audio because it's just, you can't really run things in parallel. You can't hear two things at the same time very well.
So it feels like display is an inevitable progression for a device like what Meta and Ray-Ban have produced so far.
Yeah, I think it's going to be very limited. I think that the Ray-Ban will get to a level, as I said, and then that's it, unless it adds video. Now, we don't know that doesn't, it's necessary but not necessarily sufficient that will make the whole thing take off. But that's definitely, I think, for that to keep going, it's got to add displays. But it's already too heavy. I mean, the Meta person was already saying that. Speaker yesterday was talking about how it's 43 grams or so, and she's talking about how it took her a while to get used to how heavy it was. And that's no display.
Yeah, I think one thing to point out, kind of Jeri was alluding to this, is, I don't think there's going to be a silver bullet product out there. I'm certain there will be a spectrum of products, right? From audio-only glasses to monocular small field of view stuff to binocular things. I think there'll be a spectrum of products that will all coexist together, and they will have different weights, different price points, different feature sets, just like how any other product market has evolved, right? There's high-end smartphones, there's low-end smartphones, and they all do different things.
I feel like maybe a counterpoint to that, though, is that seemed like the natural path for wrist-worn wearables to take in a lot of ways. There are people who care about fitness, there are people who care about notifications, and now at this point, everybody's just wearing an Apple Watch.
Well, that's the magic of Apple.
Well,
Yeah. See what everybody else does and then copy it.
There may be an interim period in the market where we have to go broad and diverse in order to get across a line of usability and utility, and then we come back to something that's more unified as Apple makes it all great once again in the end. How do we, though, make it less creepy? How do we slowly evolve out this weird factor, whether it's the video pass-through devices like the Apple Vision Pro or some of these other devices that kind of mangle the real-world light or somehow impede eye-to-eye contact? Addie?
I think that, we've already mentioned several really good options that, making some kind of unimpeded system. And I think one of the harder ones, though, is that right now people get the sense that the product you're wearing on your face isn't really ever going to be actually the product. The actual product is whatever data it's harvesting or is whatever service it's trying to sell. Because the companies that are making the biggest plays for consumer AR at this point are companies whose real business tends to be something else that is often a thing that people think is kind of creepy. And I would really love to see more companies that are trying to seriously make a go of consumer-based AR that are not the sort of Metas and Googles of the world, even though I really love a lot of the work they do. Unfortunately, companies like Magic Leap have tried that. It's really, really hard.
Yeah, I think one of the issues we're seeing today, these new products, is I can't even call them products, is that with any product, there's a value that the product is providing you, and there's friction associated with that product. And that friction might be cost, weight, I have to charge my Apple Watch twice a day, kind of thing, right? There's friction involved in every product. Today, all we see is friction. We're not seeing the value of these products yet because these companies aren't really showing you yet they're not unveiling their cards yet, right? And so all we have to do right now is look at these products and look at all the warts. It's too expensive. It's too heavy. It has this camera on it that I'm worried about privacy. You have to charge it twice a day. It doesn't work outside. But I think once we start seeing the value of these products, ideally, right, hopefully these product companies will start showing value that exceeds the friction of this thing. Like I had an Apple Watch, or have an Apple Watch that at my old one, I had to charge twice a day. I have an iPhone that I have to charge multiple times a day. I used to have a phone that I charged once a week, right? That friction that's involved, it's 10 times the cost. I got to charge it a bunch of times during the day. But the value that it provides to me exceeds the friction of that product. Today, we only see friction because we have not yet seen the demonstration of what these products are going to do for us.
I think we're going to have to see companies stop marketing the product in a creepy way. We saw this the first time with Google Glass. It was really unfortunate how they positioned it in the market, that it was elitist and it had some of these creepy vibes to it. And you just see it time and time again. I would argue even Apple, marketed the Vision Pro in a pretty creepy way, dad looking at grandkids or whatever, by himself and things like that. I think just a more sensitive touch to marketing.
Has anybody creeped from the whole Ray-Ban metas, right? I mean, it seems like a great product, right? And like the people that I show it to when I wear mine, like people love the product. I don't see any negative reaction yet by having a camera on this pair of glasses. People generally see it, they try it, like, oh, I want one, right? And so as long as the value is there, people get excited about the applications the value it provides people to kind of like get over it, right?
Yeah, I think in the
I sometimes think that the whole glass hole thing was a little bit of an exaggeration. I mean, it just looked ugly. It looked stupid in a lot of ways. One question I've kind of got is, does it have to be a glasses form factor? Can it be more of a headband or something? Because when you start making it, like I see these things that start out looking like glasses, but then they grow appendages and wrap around the back of your head. And why not, I sometimes think maybe you should just admit it's not going to be glasses, because when you get beyond about 25, 30 grams, when you build something that looks like glass, exactly like glasses, I mean, they still have things.
Humane AI, right?
What?
Humane AI tried it.
No, that was beyond stupid. Well, yeah, I joked before. I said, anything that has the laser scanning as a display, I start with the assumption it's a scam and work my way back. But yeah.
I was sad when I realized that I think monocles make me motion sick.
Yeah, I mean, there's visual comfort issues that people are struggling with today. Like, we see a lot of companies who are like, I really want binocular, but I'm going to go with monocular because it's lighter and cheaper. And then there's like, 30% of the world is left eye dominant. Are you going to make a left eye version and a right eye version? And then single eye is not that comfortable. It really limits the type of experiences you can have. I'm sure like people get really sick or uncomfortable looking at these things.
Mm-hmm. Something interesting I saw on the floor is somebody's got a waveguide out there. I forget the name of the company right off the top of the head. But they've got one where they have a single display but binocular. Because I do wonder about this, monocular versus binocular. It's hard for consumers. Professionals, if you're trained and pro, professionals can get away with a single color. They can get away with monocular. But the professional use tends to drive you to, or the consumers tend to like binocular. But do you really need depth? Do you really need binocular? So it's a fixed, because of that, it's going to be fixed. But that's another option, is to have a single display, but by lens.
Let's come back to one of the other challenges around control. So we talk about voice interface. It seems like it should be amazing if only the computer just understand our intention as communicated through our utterances. That'd be incredible, but of course we're not even close to that yet. One of the things that Apple's done so well through so many of its products is evolve that user experience, to evolve that user interface. So maybe, Andy, you can talk a bit about what did Apple Vision Pro get right in terms of the evolution of that user interaction, and what's still so wrong?
I feel like the really big thing Apple did was that it killed the idea of the Minority Report interface finally, the idea that you're going to be using gesture controls that are lifting your hand up really far and are trying to actually manipulate items. It's more just, okay, this is a really simple tap, you're looking at the thing. It's surprisingly intuitive for something that involves so many moving parts. I think the two big problems are A, that it's not entirely reliable, and you cannot have an interface that's not entirely reliable when that's the primary way that you use it. And that it also just highlights the fact that you don't always want to be looking at the thing you select. It makes it really hard to multitask because everything is so strictly, you're looking at a thing, that is the thing you are going to be interacting with.
I mean, Apple trained us to use touchscreens that are probably 80% accurate. I mean, they're terrible, but we got used to them. So maybe those interactions will be good over time once we get used to the annoyances.
I mean, I know, Karl, like, you're already complaining about 50 grams, right? It's already really difficult to get even displays into glasses at 50 grams. If you want to add other user UI elements into it, whether or not it's eye tracking or gesture or something else, you're just talking about more weight, size, and power challenges. And I think it's a really interesting area of innovation because we haven't seen a perfect solution yet. But I don't know if we will.
Jeri, do you have thoughts on what it could be, what should be in terms of these types of interactions with these devices?
I still love game controllers. Like, our product has a game controller. It's delightful to use. It's got 6 DOF on it. And we have the ability to do hand tracking. We don't do eye tracking. Maybe it'd be better with eye tracking. But, for entertainment, clicking a button has a tactile satisfaction you just don't get doing stuff, even in a comfortable position doing hand gestures.
Yeah, I think Meta got a lot of stuff right with the touch controllers. They feel really satisfying, and it's great that I think a lot of companies just have converged around that idea.
I mean, back in the olden times, back at Valve, we did a lot of input experiments. We did rings and watches and all kinds of, wristbands at reading the electrical pulses. There's a lot of interesting directions that could evolve over time. It's just hard to predict without a crystal ball what the right way to do it is.
Yeah, well, I like to quote an Addy. Addy Robertson has been paraphrased as saying, Apple Vision Pro is magical till it's not. And then I would add to that, and then it's damn frustrating. Because my cornea is a little bit distorted, and the eye tracking is very problematic. It jitters and stuff. I have to have a trackpad to even work the darn thing. The other big point I'd like to make here, though, too, with interfaces, is hands-free. It is not hands-free if I have to hold my hand some particular place and do particular gestures and all. Now my hands are tied up. Most of the things I see in optical AR have a heavy dependence on hands-free component. If you think about the kind of things you'd be doing with optical AR, you would want your hands free. At the same time, I've been using other products, I've been wanting a controller when I get to use the Apple Vision Pro because it works. Like I'll switch back to MetaQuest 3, and it's like, oh my God, it's like magical how it works compared to the Apple. So yeah, it's magical up to a point that you can do it with your fingers, but then you start to do it and really do stuff with it, and it's more frustrating. I'm wanting a mouse, and I'm wanting all this other stuff that I don't get with that interface.
Yeah, I think the Vision Pro is kind of interesting because they position it as a productivity tool, and productivity tools are often like mice and keyboards and things like that. So you better be really good at those kinds of functions with your UI.
Yeah. So we've been constantly waiting for Superman in this industry. The next trillion-dollar company is going to come and release a device that solves magically all of the problems that we and the inside of the industry appreciate deeply. It was Google, it was Microsoft, it was Apple. What's the risk of having this over-dependence, this over-optimism that these mega companies are going to come and solve all of these problems? Jeri, do you want to start with that one?
Okay. Oh boy. I don't know. The mega corporations, I don't know if they're going to solve these problems for us. I mean, why didn't Xerox, capitalize on all the technology they developed? Why isn't CDC and, all these old computing companies like the dominant forces out there? I believe that a lot of the innovation is going to come from the smaller, nimble companies that are willing to try a few things and focus on a very narrow market and get really good at that. I think the bar for like an Apple, like a product, is just so high that they have to put the kitchen sink into it, and that's how you end up with the Vision Pro.
I think this is also intersected in a really unfortunate way with the way that the last 10 years of the tech world has worked, which is that as soon as a company does something interesting and is small, they just get acquired or crushed. And I would really love to see that not happen with AR. And we are at a point where I think regulators are looking more carefully at mergers. They've tried to block them, haven't always been particularly successful. But I'm hoping maybe that means that some things play out a little differently this time.
One thing I think is interesting, at least on the optical and display side of things, one thing that it's kind of learned is that even these very giant companies, Apple, Google, Microsoft, Amazon, blah, 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 there's no magic bullet out there. Like the technology that people have access to is generally the same. It's not like one of these giant companies has a magic display secret sauce that somebody else can't have or can't have access to. We're all playing by the same laws of physics right now. And like it's less about who has access to some magic technology, because it's not, I don't think it's out there. And it's more about who can make the smart, right decisions to make a focused product that's not necessarily the kitchen sink, that's going to result in a 100-gram pair of glasses. Yeah, I think there's a lot of really interesting product-level decisions that can be made. And the good news is like the technology out there, I think, is is basically at minimum viable product. Like I think there is a combination where it's like can be made good AR glasses out there.
On the other hand, I think vertical integration still matters, though. Like one of the things that the Vision Pro can do that, say, the Meta Quest Pro, which tried for almost the exact same thing, couldn't, is that it works with Apple products. You can hook it up to your Mac. You don't have to download 3 layers of software. And so I think that owning a product that does something similar and useful and complementary is still really valuable.
That's a really interesting point because like right now, one of the huge advantages that Apple has is they have this like platform that just works with each other, right? You open a pair of AirPods and it suddenly works with all your devices, and the AVP is very similar. In the Android world, it's already very fragmented among the smartphone space, and then the accessories of the smartphone is even more fragmented. As we have to rely on AI and how personalization of AI, and it's a little bit creepy, right? The data side, like a lot of people worried about that. The fragmentation and the access to information for these AI glasses is going to be very difficult on these other platforms if you have to worry about fragmentation of the ecosystem, access to personal data. So it's one of those things that Apple, I'm sure, they're already in a very advantageous position that the other ecosystem partners like have to figure it out.
I think there's some serious headwinds out there for the small players as well. The investment environment is quite a bit different than the earlier days of, like, say, Silicon Valley when it developed. The investors are impatient these days, so you better go for a moonshot. And if you don't stick the landing, Humane AI, Rabbit R1, come to mind as recent, trying to shoot for the moon and kind of missing, then you're gone. And it's unfortunate. There's probably going to be a lot of churn in small companies that come and go because they're going for like big lofty goals and you just can't achieve it because we're dealing with the laws of physics.
We've been around a while, right?
Yeah, we have. And how long? About
12 years.
12. Got me.
We have a microphone here in the center of the room. If anybody would like to jump up and ask a question, please do so behind the mic. Yeah, great.
We've got about 8 minutes, so please step on up to the mic and ask your question.
I'd like to hear everyone's thoughts on the timeline to AR glasses being your mobile phone, like replacing your mobile phone.
Can we take that in a couple of stages, actually, if you don't mind? I'll start with timeline to when it's relevant and commonplace in the enterprise, and then when is it commonplace in consumer, and then when does it replace your smartphone?
I think the answer to your first question answer is really easy. I don't see a foreseeable path for the glasses to completely replace your phone, at least not in the next decade.
How about the enterprise? When are we going to see this commonplace sort of device in the enterprise?
I think we're going to see consumer AR glasses. Let's see, when is it right now? I think certainly within the next 24 months, you will see big companies be shipping consumer AR glasses within the next roughly 2 years.
So the smartphone is currently the kind of de facto example for everybody, the gold standard, as it were, of usefulness every day. But back when it was started, it wasn't solving anybody's problem. Nobody wanted a mobile phone. Nobody needed anything like this. It was forced on the market, and everybody eventually adapted. I'm wondering, do you think, as any on the panel, is there still room in the AR and VR space for people to come in and say, hey, guess what? Wings is the new factor. We're all going to do wings, and just force it on the market over time? Or do we kind of have to live in a world now where we're constrained by what the market will accept?
Well, I think, using your cell phone example, it was a lot of business people using cell phones. They were installing these giant things into their
Trunks. My mother had a trunk-mounted cell phone back in the day because she was a traveling saleswoman.
Yeah, foremans of, big businesses in manufacturing adopted them first. And, I think that's a good path for a lot of XR companies, like find your vertical market and do that really well. Eventually they, gained adoption to brick phone and then, much smaller things.
I remember when I first got I think it was an iPhone 6. It was the first 6-inch iPhone. People made so much fun of me for having a 6-inch phone. They were like, you have to get special pants with that phone? That's a giant phone, right? And now 6 inches is small. And the point is like, the applications and the value that the products are going to provide you haven't yet been unveiled, right? And now like nobody cares carrying a 6-inch phone, 6-7-inch phone. And I think AR glasses are going to be very similar. They're going to start at a point where they're like familiar enough and close enough to like something that we want, and then it's going to take a life of its own. Like who knows what these things will look like in 10 years from now? They may not look like glasses at all.
I miss my pager.
You missed your pager. Yeah, it was so single purpose and very effective. I was going to ask, what is the use case that you think will break that 1 million user mark on the consumer AR side? What's that first use case that draws that?
I would like it to be translation.
Translation?
Well, good. I feel like that's an easier one to do. It's going to be something AI focused, but I have no clue. Like when the iPhone came out, I had no clue that 5 years later I can call a random stranger and jump into their car, right? Like those type of things, just like unimaginable.
I still maintain Maps, I think, was the secret killer app for the iPhone. It just completely transformed the way that you interact with space.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, my name is Thad Stoner. I'm professor at Georgia Tech. I'm going to make a bold prediction here that the future, at least the first system to sell over 1 million units, will be a small field of view, monocular, non-line of sight display, and monochrome is okay. Now the reason I say that is, number one, I've done 20 different user studies in my lab that we'll be publishing soon on this subject. But the other thing is that our phones, which is the most popular interface out there, are only 9 degrees by 16 degrees field of view. By putting something outside of line of sight, it means that it doesn't interrupt you while you're crossing the street or driving or flying a plane. Right? We know these numbers. So between 8 degrees and 20 degrees towards the ear, and plus or minus 8 degrees. I'm looking at Karl here so he can digest all these things.
Well, I wrote a whole article about it.
And not having a pixel in line of sight. So now feel free to pick me apart and disagree with me.
I want to know a price point.
Yeah.
Well, I think the first market's going to be captioning for the hard of hearing, not for the deaf. Possible also transcription, not translation. At that price point, you're talking about making reading glasses for people as opposed to hearing aids. There's a lot of pushback against hearing aids, but reading glasses people tend to do. So I'd say you're probably in the $200, $300 range.
I think your prediction is spot on, minus the color, the green only thing. I think that's not going to fly.
I said green, I said
monochrome.
I said monochrome's okay.
Yeah. But I think the monocular field of view is going to be an entry-level product. And I think you will see products that will fit that category with roughly that field of view, with roughly that offset angle, is what you're going to see in the beginning. Yeah, I agree with that. But I think that's the first step. I think you will see a lot of products after that that's going to do a lot more than monocular, monochrome, offset displays. Start going to larger field of view binocular. I think that will happen pretty quickly.
It does feel like somebody tries to do that every 18 months, though. Like Intel tried to make a pair of glasses that did that. It's a little bit what North did. I guess it's just a matter of sort of throwing the idea at the wall, because I think it's a good one until it takes.
Hey there. So with like Ray-Bans and X-Real and some of the other ones that are more consumer focused on the fashion aspect, whenever you look at manufacturing and the applications of an AR glasses in that sense, why aren't more companies going after OSHA certification for their lenses? Is there something that's preventing that, or is that just a market that hasn't really been tapped into?
You're talking about lens certification, like for regular
being,
glasses?
Being able to utilize an AR glasses in the same way that you have safety glasses for a construction zone or manufacturing.
What's hard about it?
Yeah, I think kind of what Jeri's saying, like these are great unaddressed verticals. There's a lot of verticals like that. If you want to make safety glasses that are certified safety with a display in them, I think that's a great opportunity. Like we just haven't seen companies working on that. And I think there's probably, maybe Jeri has some ideas, like some interesting verticals that you can go and attack that some of the larger companies just aren't doing.
Part of the reason is material. A lot of waveguide technology today has been glass.
I will say that many waveguides have already been ANSI level sort of safety certified already.
Yeah.
So there's consumer safety, the ball drop tests, and there's industrial level safety. We've already seen stuff that's already passed both levels. So it's very doable.
And
I think it's the utility has to be there to justify making that product. And then doing the certification is probably a pretty straightforward thing for them to do. As a thought exercise, just talking about all this displays and stuff, at Valve, we did an experiment, like, what if we don't even have a display? We just have LEDs mounted around the rim of your glasses and give you, ancillary data. And it was quite delightful hooking this up to a game and knowing the bad guy was coming from your left or right. And, we didn't know how to productize it and turn it into, something that had enough value add.
Yeah, I also think you're going to find that the waveguides and stuff are going to get encased. They're going to put optics in them anyway. So that I just saw a Loomis thing the other night that they're actually able to glue the
Prescription
optical
optics.
surfaces right to the waveguide. And so, and getting rid of the air gap, which thins it out. So that's encasing. So now you're going to start encasing that glass anyway. It's going to have plastic and stuff around it. There's always a trade-off between plastic versus glass and image quality and field of view and stuff, indexes and stuff.
I'm Peter
I'm
Smith.
sorry, we're out of time. I know this is a very passionate topic for all of us. I'm hoping that the panelists perhaps could be outside to answer some more questions.
We'll hang out outside for a
Let's
little
give
bit.
them a round of applause.